the game this week that fascinates me almost as much as anything else. Nothing beats Michigan, Ohio State at this point, but
Right.
Oregon State, because it's a must win for Oregon. Like what Jed Fish has done at Arizona, I think people are hip to now, especially people with job openings, but they're right there. Like Oregon's got to beat Oregon State or Arizona's going to take their spot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And look, it's both the Apple Cup and whatever we're calling Oregon State, the Platypus Cup, right? These two teams playing in there, which is great. Beaver and duck, platypus. The idea that Oregon State in its final Pac-12 game, and well, that's everybody's final Pac-12, but their final game as a power team right now, at least, and same goes for Washington State, have this unbelievable ability to play spoiler. That, you know, they're both on the road, Wazoo and Oregon State, but Oregon State especially, it seems especially fraught because they're a pretty good team. Like, their ability is pretty high in terms of beating a good team. They were right there against Arizona. They had the weird fake field goal call near the end of the first half, but they've been pretty strong this year. And Wazoo has been more flawed. I think they've lost like 6 of 7 before demolishing Colorado. But yeah, the Oregon State-Oregon game, I don't think the Beavers have won in Eugene in something like 15 or 16 years, since 2007. But the pieces are there. They had the comeback last year. It looked like Oregon had that game in hand, and Oregon's been airing the fourth quarter in their facility around the clock on the screens. But they have the ability, right? DJU is one of those quarterbacks that he can fall forward 3 yards on 4th and 2. And they can run the ball. Their offensive line is beat up, but well coached. And defensively, they've gotten off the field enough. I don't think they're great, but Oregon is beat up on a lot of below average teams. I'll be the first to tell you that. And they have taken care of business. They do what a great team should do against those teams. But Oregon State offers a little bit more, right? They're more complete than USC. Then you look at ASU, Stanford, Colorado. Like, they're just a better team than those. So they're still offering a pretty big challenge.
Yeah, I cannot wait for that. And that I love the split on Thanksgiving weekend. I love that they move so much to Black Friday. It feels like everything kind of gets its own showcase now.
Yes.
And that game especially, because it's running opposite the land grant trophy game, Michigan State and Penn State, which fans of those teams are going to care about, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And so you're going to get that. You're going to have Texas and Texas Tech playing that night, which Texas Tech is playing better very quietly. Now they did just barely squeak by UCF, but they could throw a wrench in lots of stuff.
My favorite part of this Big 12 tiebreak scenario is the fact that the games are split, right? So if Texas wins, they're in. We know this. And then if Oklahoma State wins, I believe they're in as well, because they hold the tiebreaker over Oklahoma. But the Big 12's official statement was basically, if 2 of the 3 teams competing, so the Oklahoma schools and Kansas State, if something happens with them and Texas loses, we'll keep you updated on Saturday, right?
It
was to be continued, right? They were like, it's complicated. We'll get there. We need to go back to the lab. And it's kind of amazing. And it's amazing that the Big 12 is potentially in this scenario once again after 2008.
It is incredible. And we're going to get this. I don't think this is a bug, by the way. I think this is a feature of what is to come. Because everybody's like, there are going to be so many crazy tiebreakers. Yes. It's interesting. Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah. It's what's going to happen is, if there are sort of weird branches being pulled out of trees and we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what that means, branches pulled out of trees. But if things fall in a weird way, we're going to get to like the 7th or 8th tiebreaker. I looked it up if Penn State had beaten Michigan and then Michigan had beaten Ohio State, Penn State would have won the Big Ten East.
Thanks to Iowa.
They beat Iowa, which would have been the highest ranked team, or the best team in the West that any of those 3 had beaten. And so I love all of this. It's going to come down to a spelling bee between Chris Kleiman and Mike Gundy. I don't know what's going to happen if we get down to the 11th or 12th one. Yeah.
Well, it's like the old Friday Night Lights thing. They go to the truck stop and flip a coin. Like, meet at a Whataburger. Get it sponsored. Have a drawing. Like, make Nelly do it.
I play 1/4 of a tiebreaker. Find the city that's exactly halfway between Manhattan, Kansas, and Stillwater, Oklahoma, and you play in a high school stadium for 1/4, and that decides it.
When I was in high school, the tiebreaker scenario when you had multiple teams that were vying for the top 2 spots in a district, because the top 2 teams in the district moved to the playoffs, they would bring them all together and put them on the 10-yard line, and you play a series here and and the next 2 play a series, and like televise that.
Yeah. I mean, start in triple overtime, right? It's just 2-point conversions bouncing back and forth. Who's got the better plays?
God,
it's redoing the old Illinois Penn State game. Yeah.
Everybody, shows up for this thing. You put it in a college stadium, 50,000 people show up, and they run 2-point conversions.
They run a bunch of, then they go home, right? And here's the caveat: both teams have to be coached by a former coach. So it's Bill Snyder coaching against
Les Miles.
Yeah, I don't know. So it's, you really have to dig deep, and I love it.
It is amazing. But yes, the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, like the ACC, the 17-team ACC is definitely going to have some really messed up tiebreakers.
Yeah, I think it was our friend Stuart that said, like, it's totally possible as these leagues grow to have 3 8-0 teams. And you're just like, sorry, congratulations on going undefeated in the conference. Try again next year.
But that's kind of what's going to happen this year if you have 4 undefeated teams and a 1-loss team that people think is better.
Right. At least you can point to them having the opportunity to go undefeated.
Yeah.
And being left out. Yeah. And we could have we could set up a bracket of like the best teams to never play in a BCS championship game and the best teams to never make a 4-team playoff. And there's going to be some bangers in there. There's go back to, I think it was, what year was the Matt Stafford year where they were great?
2008.
It was 2008. Yeah. At Georgia. Like that was,
2007 was the one where they got much better and were just destroying people at the end of the season. Like if 2007 Georgia had been in a playoff, it probably would have won the national title.
Yeah, this is a good week to do a leftover tournament, right? Thanksgiving week to do a leftover tournament. You talk about like 2014 TCU.
What about 2015 Ohio State? Like, I understand why they didn't make the playoff.
Yeah.
But they would have beaten every team in that playoff.
Yeah, unless Michigan State were in that playoff.
Michigan State was in that playoff.
Right.
I suspect they would have beaten them had they played again.
Yeah, probably. But the Big Ten did go for a stretch without scoring a touchdown in the playoff. Like there was like a weird years upon years, like thousands of days in which the Big Ten hadn't scored a touchdown in the playoff. But yeah, I mean, personally, right? 2001 Oregon, when Mike Bellotti called the BCS a cancer, when they shelled Colorado, but Nebraska still got into the championship game against Miami. So everybody has that. And there's your leftover tournament.
Oh, yeah. Well, 2001, Tennessee and Florida getting into that tournament. Now, I still think Miami beats everybody that year.
Yeah, totally.
But it would have been really interesting to see Oregon get a chance to play in Tennessee and Florida. That would have been a lot of fun. But that's the thing. Like next year, even if let's say there are 3 8-0 SEC teams or 3 8-0 Big Ten teams in some future year, they're all making the playoff, though.
That's true.
They may not make the conference title game with a chance to earn the bye, but at least they're making the playoff.
They're making the playoff. I don't know how much you've looked at this year's like 12, 13, 14, 15 type teams. Not as fun to argue about, right? Like, Ole Miss or Penn State. Like, I don't know. Both of them are pretty flawed.
That's fine, though. But I'd rather that than somebody legitimately get screwed between 4 and 5.
Like, sure. But has somebody been legitimately screwed? Like, you could say Ohio State in 2015, but like they had the chance.
Well, no, you understand why. I think any TCU or Baylor fan would tell you they got screwed in 2014.
Yeah, don't give up 60 points in a game, right?
To each other.
Yeah, to each other. So look, there are always reasons, but it's hard to make the case that either one of those teams would have stopped.
There's no
Zeke Elliott or anything.
They would have been destroyed in the playoff. Like they were very one-dimensional. They were all offense.
Yeah.
Like, and I know nobody wants to hear that, but they would have been.
Of course.
So, but I would rather see them get destroyed in the playoff. So you can say, look, because maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they have the game of their lives. And because nobody thought TCU would beat Michigan last year.
Sure.
You're going to have those games. And that's why we play them. So
I agree. And look, how many times is that game simulated and TCU wins? Out of 100? 30 times, 20 times. Like you get 2 pick sixes. Like it's going to change the complexion of a game, but that's why you play football. It's great.
Prize Picks, the most fun daily fantasy platform in America. How do you do it? You download the app. You use the code Andy. They will match your first deposit up to $100, and then you're picking squares. So one square may say, I don't know, Blake Corum, 96.5 rushing plus receiving yards for the Michigan running back in the game against Ohio State. You decide, is it going to wind up being more than that or less than that? You pick that square. You pick another square. You can have as few as 2. You can go up to 5. You can make 25 times your money, depending on how you do it. I had a great 3-pick power play hit right after I had one of the worst beats ever last weekend. Bo Nix had the amount of rushing yards he needed, and then he got sacked, and then he didn't. And so my Deacon Hill, the Iowa quarterback, I knew he was going to blow up. So I had a more than on his passing yardage, and I got it. And so I figured Bo Nix will definitely run for more than 7.5 yards. And he did. And then he got sacked, and he wound up with 7 yards. But then I hit a 3-pick power play, which turned $100 into $500, and I felt much better. Lots of great action this weekend. That Michigan-Ohio State game, of course, is what everybody's watching. They seem to be thinking there's going to be some yards gained in this game. Travion Henderson, 102.5 for the Ohio State running back, rushing and receiving combined. Kyle McCord, Ohio State's quarterback, 237.5 passing yards. J.J. McCarthy, Michigan's quarterback. We have not seen him play that well the last couple of weeks. 201.5 passing yards. Let's go to the Civil War on Friday night. Bo Nix, 313.5 passing yards. DJ Uiagalelei, 218.5. So they're expecting a big, big night from the Oregon quarterback. Not so much from the Oregon State quarterback. I think DJU going to have to go way more than if they want to pull the upset. Of course, what's Marvin Harrison Jr. going to do in the game? That's the big one. This is the biggest alien wide receiver that we've seen in years. 87.5 receiving yards, more than or less than. More than, I think Ohio State probably wins the game. If Michigan can hold him down, then I think they may be going to the Big Ten championship game. But so many great options. And of course, you've got other sports. You got the NFL, the NBA, the NHL. If they play it, you can probably play it on Prize Picks. Get that Prize Picks app. Use the referral code Andy. They will match your first deposit up to $100. So if you deposit $100, they'll deposit $100. If you deposit $50, they'll deposit $50. So much fun. Definitely ratchets up the tension on some of these games. And these games are already going to be tense. So download that Prize Picks app and get playing. We get the ultimate That's Why You Play the Game in Ann Arbor this week.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, Dan. I don't remember the last time I was this excited about it because I don't know what's going to happen. Everything about this game is weird.
Mm-hmm.
There's a deep, compelling storyline no matter what happens, no matter who wins or how they win. Like, it is going to be bananas.
It is. And look, even excusing all of the Michigan off-field spying allegations and all of that, you have a suspension that comes from that gives us head coach Sharon Moore, but only on Saturday because Jim Harbaugh's coaching during the week. And it kind of seems, and maybe it's just because it's a 2-game sample size and Michigan fans got very upset when I suggested that Sharon Moore doesn't trust J.J. McCarthy, like 3rd and 6 against Maryland, midfield, not throwing it, not going for it on 4th. Interesting. Like that he is coaching like an offensive lineman as a head coach. I have a different theory. It's not J.J. McCarthy that he doesn't trust. It was that particular 5 offensive linemen. Okay. Why? Because Ladarius Henderson was out. Right. And then Carson had to be moved over. Mm-hmm. Because the backup left tackle who'd been Miles, I'm blanking on the name, but he had gotten hurt, and so the right tackle had to be moved over to the left. They don't apparently have 2 tackles that they are supremely confident in. They are more confident when Henderson's on the field, and so I think you can probably call a game where you have most of the menu available to you as long as Henderson's on the field. So I think that's the issue. Miles Hinton was the one who came in, got hurt, and then they had to move Carson Barnhart over to left tackle. So that was the issue.
Sharon Moore knows that situation intimately.
Sure.
And I think that's where the distrust came from. So my
But
guess is
JJ
if he has a
McCarthy also
line he
hasn't-
trusts, what's that?
He also hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in a month, right?
No.
Since like October 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what worries me going into this game, where there seemed to be that trust last year as he was hitting Cornelius Johnson down the field. And, they were opening up the offense, which opened up, the running game. And that to me is an interesting subplot here. We have two quarterbacks, like Kyle McCord's fine, but he isn't CJ Stroud. And the offense is fine. It's not where it's been. And then all of a sudden we have people charting the coaches who have been most profoundly born on third base. And Ryan Day that's like now a talking point. The longer we get away from the Urban Meyer era, like there's a lot of duct tape on these teams right now. And that's why the story is fascinating, this matchup. And I can't wait to watch.
I can't either. And the Day part of it, I think, is maybe the more fascinating thing. As much as happened with Michigan, the Ryan Day piece of this is so interesting. Well, one, you've got the Michigan people making their claims that Ryan Day had something to do with them getting turned in, which Day has denied.
Right.
But let's say someone from Ohio State did have a hand in turning them in. They've now actually succeeded in putting more pressure on Ryan Day than he would have had.
Yes, absolutely. And God, there was a CJ Stroud quote this week that it's like nice to play for a coach who's not stuck up or something like that. That was like a weird criticism. Like there just seems to be a lot of friction in Columbus, even more than usual. And when you have Marvin Harrison Jr., it covers up for a lot. When you have the defense that's been playing as well as it has this year, I mean, I don't think the pass rush is where it's been, but otherwise they've been great. Like, what do you do if the crosser to Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't there, right? It worked against Penn State. It's worked this year in big moments, but like Michigan has a defense that can defend a crosser. They can pass off a receiver no matter who it is. And so there is something fascinating about both of these teams, Ohio State being 83% of where their fans would like them to be, and Michigan not really giving its fans a taste for 9 games of what they could be against a good team. Like, I think it's probably 2006 might be the last time, or was it 2016? Like 2006, I think, was 1 versus 2.
Yes.
So that was Troy Smith, I believe.
Yeah, it was. Yep. And that was the one where the winner was getting into the BCS championship game, and the argument was, is the loser deserving of a rematch?
A rematch, right.
And then we found out, oh wait,
Florida's
the whole
better.
SEC was better.
Florida's better.
But
yeah,
it was. But we didn't know that at the time.
Right.
Like, that's the year the SEC became the SEC. And it happened like I was at Jarvis Moss's locker when he said the thing that caused all that.
Mm-hmm.
He was the Florida defensive end who, after they beat Ohio State, goes, we played 4 teams in the SEC that were better than them. And that's where all that started. But the thing is, I remember that year vividly. There was no doubt that whoever won the game was the best team in the country.
Yes.
Like, we didn't think USC, we didn't think any of the SEC teams, we didn't think any of them had a chance.
Right. And those teams were stacked. They had great players, they had NFL players, and both of these teams seem to be stacked. It's just, I don't know if I see a team being able to score 27 points in this game, which is a very different idea.
It feels like the Notre Dame Ohio State game to me.
Yeah.
It does. We were talking to Spencer Holbrook from Letterman Row yesterday, and he said he thinks it's a little higher scoring than that. I'm not sure it is. I feel like this is going to be a grinded out, like whoever can mount that drive in the fourth quarter is going to win the game.
Yeah, there's something weird about Ohio State on the road this year. They were down to Rutgers a few weeks ago at halftime. They just, even like, it was kind of a sluggish start against Purdue, if I remember correctly. It was like 10-3 or something at halftime. I could be getting these numbers wrong. I apologize. But there is something they didn't show much against Notre Dame when they were on the road offensively, and that's early on in Kyle McCord's starting tenure. But yeah, there's that element to it that this Ohio State team, especially on offense, just comes out a little bit spooked. Maybe it was 10-3 against Wisconsin at half. Maybe that's
what it was. Yeah, it was Wisconsin.
It was, and so in Ann Arbor, given the baggage, given the pressure that like, oh, they don't have their head coach, oh, they haven't been playing super well and distancing themselves from teams these past couple weeks. Like, Ohio State has an opportunity, but they haven't really shown themselves to be killers away from Columbus this year.
Yeah, it is. Everything about it is fascinating. I cannot wait. I'm going to be there. I'm so excited. Like I've made my plans for like, go get breakfast, walk to the stadium, get there super early, like soak it all in, because this is what it's about. Like when you get a game like this or the Iron Bowl where the two teams are both in national title contention, like this is everything. So I can't wait.
By the way, there's no, you just mentioned, getting breakfast and going to the game and soaking it all in. There's no, in my experience, there's no drug, there's no single experience, however R-rated you want to get with this illusion, to me, that gives me the goosebumps, like being at a huge game, either on the field or in the crowd or wherever, 5 minutes before kickoff. It doesn't even matter the sport. It could be football. I've been to like a Duke, North Carolina game at Duke, and like there is something palpable in the air where just like everybody is waiting to burst out of their skin in anticipation. It's a drug. It's amazing.
And especially one like this where you do not know what's going to happen.
No.
Like you could tell me any score, any victor, and I would believe you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no 4K TV that replicates that. For as great as the experience is at home, no TV. I don't care if you have an 85-inch screen. I don't care how comfortable your couch is. I don't care how good of a cook you are. There's nothing that compares to the 5-minute mark right before kickoff at a huge game.
And that's a good time for me to tell you about Game Time. Because that is the best place to get last-minute tickets. Download that Game Time app. Use the code Staples, $20 off your first purchase. You can get a ticket right now to the Michigan-Ohio State game in the Big House. Now, it's not the cheapest ticket, I will admit, but you can get a ticket on Game Time. And in fact, you can look at exactly what your vantage point would be at that 5 minutes before the game mark when you're about to burst out of your skin. Couple more taps, that ticket's yours. If you bought a couple, need to send one to your friend on game day, you can text it to them. So get that Game Time app, use the code Staples, $20 off your first purchase. You want to go to any of the big rivalry games this weekend. You want to go to the game in Ann Arbor. You want to go to the Civil War in Eugene. You want to go to Florida State in Gainesville. You want to go to South Carolina, Clemson, and Columbia. They got tickets. Get the Game Time app, code Staples, $20 off your first purchase. We didn't plan to do an ad read there, but Dan just set me up. And I was like, that's where I need to tell you about Game Time. Connor Stallions did that for me a few weeks ago, and then you did it now.
Look at that. Segway Pro.
Love it. Love it. Well, Dan, I one more game I do want to talk about, and it's the one that's happening in my town. I will not be there for it, unfortunately, but this is one of those that when the playoff started, we imagined a scenario like this because we all remember Kenyon Martin in the Big East tournament for Cincinnati on Selection Sunday. I think he got hurt the day before Selection Sunday. And then how does that affect their seeding? Jordan Travis goes down against North Alabama, nightmare scenario for Florida State. Tate Rodemaker comes in, backup quarterback. He now gets 2 games to show what he can do. If he plays well and they beat Florida and beat Louisville, do you think they're good?
I look, you'd have to give me final scores if they beat them each by double digits. How do you say no, right? With the precedent of Cardale Jones.
Right. And he's the one precedent we have, which is crazy that it's taken 10 years for that.
So the Cardale Jones thing is interesting because Ohio State left, no doubt. Against, I think it was Wisconsin, right?
5-0 against Wisconsin.
It was something crazy like that.
Yeah.
He left, no doubt. And so you can say, if there's a drop-off, we can't see it immediately. The scoreboard doesn't reflect it, and that's plenty for us. Like, at that point, if you're absolutely demolishing Florida, who's a flawed team, of course, and Louisville's good, but I think we agree that they're not incredible right now.
They lost to Pitt.
They lost to Pitt. They're not distancing themselves from average competition. It's fine. It's a great story. It's a great year one, undoubtedly. They beat them by 10 to 14 points, and Florida by 10 to 14 points, 17 points. Like, what case do you have against Florida State, really? Because it's not like Jordan Travis Florida State had been distancing themselves all that often from average ACC competition. So if Tate Rodemaker's doing more of the same, I don't think the case is terribly strong to keep a 13-0 Florida State out.
I am fascinated by that one. That's the thing about this weekend. Something weird's going to happen somewhere, whether it's like Oklahoma, TCU, Texas Tech, Oregon State, Florida State. Something strange is going to happen, and it's going to affect everything else. And that is
I hope
beauty.
so. It's been so boring. November's been largely
It's
so
a little
boring.
bit.
And I appreciate excellence. I've said it this year. Like, I think winning is a skill. Like, win your clunkers, whatever, but winning is an actual skill that, whether you win 27-21 or 27-0, right? Winning means that your players are confident, that your assistant coaches are getting the right guys on the field, that the correct 3rd and 4th down decisions are being made, that clock decisions late are being made correctly by and large. And winning is a skill. Ask Miami fans. So I am hopeful that that we get a little bit of chaos, that we get a little bit of clarity, but like, I don't know, we've got a lot of experienced quarterbacks. We've got a lot of really good coaches. Like, it's going to be difficult for Texas Tech or for Washington State or Oregon State or even Florida. Man, Florida, if they just had a little bit of defense, if they just tackled a little bit better in the open field.
Yeah. I don't think that starts against Keon Coleman and Jaheim Bell, unfortunately.
No, it doesn't seem to be that way. So it's really tough to see where it comes from, but it's rivalry week, especially we're getting a lot of these teams with spoiler potential, not in the Pac-12, but elsewhere at home, right? Florida's at home, Auburn's at home in the Iron Bowl. Yep. So there's at least that element to this where it's just like one last rodeo, one last opportunity to drive a nail into a rival. Like, it's something, and I appreciate it.
Well, you know who has mastered the skill of winning? Dan Rubenstein.
Yes.
And pizza.
Everybody's always happy with pizza.
I want that Detroit style. That Detroit style you made me when I was at your house was spectacular.
Thank you. It's a really good one.
Highly underrated style of pizza.
Yeah, you have to make it a little airy and crispy because it can get sort of spongy and dense if you don't. And it's sort of a beast to wrangle sometimes dough-wise. But if it comes out, you're getting a good product.
Dan, you know where I'm flying on Friday?
Where's that?
Detroit.
You need some Rex?
I might.
You got to pace yourself because you got a game to cover. You got probably something to talk about after the game. But you can. Detroit's a great food town. You can get great pizza there.
Oh, you can also, Slo's Barbecue downtown. Clarkston Union up in the burbs where I stole my my mac and cheese recipe from.
Nice.
Listen,
yeah. Look,
there's all kinds of stuff. I'm so excited.
You can get great barbecue. You can get great pizza anywhere. It doesn't need to be in Texas. It doesn't need to be New York. You just have to find somebody who cares enough and as much as the people in Texas or Georgia or New York or wherever. And that can be challenging, but Detroit does it well.
Damn right. Dan Rubenstein, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.